bring in Gordon Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China. Gordon, obviously, we're witnessing a very strong threat coming from North Korea as we just agreed on these sanctions.
Yeah, these sanctions are important, and kudos to Nikki Haley and to the Trump administration for putting them into place and getting 15-0 in the Security Council. But unfortunately, these are incremental. These are just a little bit tighter than the previous 6 set of sanctions, and the North Koreans are able to adjust around them. So what we need to do, if we want to cripple the North Korean missile program, or even if we just want to bring them to the table to talk, what we need to do is go all in, all at once.
What would that take? What would that take?
It would take, for instance, scouring the world, because there are a lot of countries that do business with North Korea. But the other thing that it would take is going after Chinese banks, because they have been money laundering for the North Koreans. And not just the small ones, the big ones. Bank of China, one of China's so-called Big Four banks, was named in a UN report last year for devising and operating a money cleaning scheme for the North Koreans. You walk down this street, Sandra, you will see a Bank of China branch. And the question the Trump administration needs to ask is, why can these guys launder money for North Koreans, do business in the U.S., and have access to dollar accounts in New York?
Walk us through how that plays out. Let's say the Trump administration gets tough with China on sanctioning Chinese banks and Chinese businesses doing business with coal and steel on the Koreans. How do the Chinese respond? How does it affect American trade with China and American relations with China? I'm
sure the Chinese will huff and puff, and they probably will retaliate in some way, but we really don't care. For instance, we are the trade deficit country, $309.8 billion deficit in goods and services last year. Trade deficit countries don't worry too much about trade friction. We have an economy, John, that is in reality about twice as big as China's. We can push them around. We do not have an economy that is geared to selling things to China. China has an economy geared to selling things to us.
I got to take the market stance over here. I mean, one of the biggest problems you have is that our corporations are focused on selling our goods and services into China. If you look, Tim Cook alone said 6 quarters ago that Apple is going to be their that China is going to be their biggest market, right? There's going to be over 300 million middle-class citizens in China by 2020 that we need to sell to. That's almost the population in the United States here. You have Starbucks going over there trying to sell. I mean, this is jobs here in the U.S. of American companies trying to sell over there.
Yeah, there's no doubt that some American companies will be hurt. And you didn't include in your list GE, which has a lot of investments in China. But if you look at the overall relationship, it really is in favor of the United States. And the question is, there's 2 things. First of all, we cannot allow the Chinese to continue to engage in increasingly predatory practices, because it hurts American companies across the board, not only the ones in China, but also, of course, American workers here. And the other thing is, China is arming the North Koreans. So, for instance, those launches on July 4th and July 28th, the Chinese participated in them because those launchers were Chinese.
So, Kevin, just to throw it back at the markets, this idea that, Apple and GE want to make profits in China, is that morally acceptable when the North Koreans are torturing and enslaving their own people and killing
I'll tell you this much.
The rest of
Free
the world?
markets are the greatest growth engine for prosperity that the world has ever known. So if we can get the Chinese economy to go from less communistic to more capitalistic and more business, I mean, people are going to...
Obviously,
it's better for everybody.
Sure, of course it is, but China's moving in the wrong direction. You have Xi Jinping, the current ruler. He's closing the Chinese economy off to the rest of the world. So it is just moving in the wrong direction.
So I want to talk about the reality of this and how realistic it is to think that maybe we might see some action from Washington on this. We spoke earlier to Florida Congressman Ron DeSantis. We asked him about the possibility of issuing sanctions on Chinese companies. Here's what he had to say.
There are some talks. I mean, I actually just passed, as part of our defense authorization bill, a measure that would allow our procurement to look at if some of these Chinese companies were dealing with North Korea, that the secretary could then not do business with them. So that's a very small example, but I think it's an important one. So yes, there are thoughts of that.
So he's not ruling it out.
No, certainly. And, there are no good solutions going forward. After you have decades of misguided trade policy and North Korea policy, everything going forward is going to hurt the United States. So we've got to get past this notion that there are costs and no-cost solutions.